It's incredible how powerful some emotions are. When speaking of undead, it is often things like hate, or sometimes love, that allow them to cling to this world. But when it comes to today's subject, that of the Wraith, I think it's a bit more subjective. Their spite. See, the type of person to become a Wraith is the one who would never let something go, regardless of how big or small it is. Maybe this person was a rival and ruined their opponent's entire life, or maybe they just started an argument against someone that was completely mundane, but refused to let it go. Regardless, they are the type of person who would cling to something like this. But see, I'm partly underselling it, as wraiths are like many undead creatures, created by pure negative energy that builds up within a person. But what sets the wraith apart is just how this happens, more so than anything else. See, everyone has a limit to magical energy they can store within themselves at once, and if it breaches capacity slowly and more manageably, you might become more powerful. This is how the likes of warlocks and sorcerers actually grow in their capabilities. But if the energy is natural necrotic energy instead, that doesn't exactly play well with someone, so instead it will start to break you. Usually this happens slowly, damaging your very soul over long periods of time. But the wraiths are a little different. In short, what makes someone a wraith is, well, someone who lived a horrid life, and I do mean a horror one, but all of this negative energy overflows into them so quickly that it actually just kills them instantly. To be exact, it sort of collapses in on itself and causes the body to implode. And instead of the soul rightly going to the hells or the abyss where it belongs, it just sort of lingers there. I've never actually witnessed such an occurrence, but I have been told it is a remarkable spectacle, if surprisingly gory. But I have to get technical for a moment. The person they were in life is completely gone at this point. When the soul implodes, taking about half the body with it, it is utterly destroyed, leaving nothing left. The wraith, then, is negative energy that the person formed suddenly given new life. And it hates it. It absolutely despises the life that has just been created, and will most likely try to kill everything on sight, like a lot of undead do. I should note, however, that they might actually have some of the memories of the person that spawned them, even though it's not actually them. Hell, they might even have some of the same traits, which leads to quite a bit of confusion about who the wraith actually is. Could they be classed as a person to begin with? Magic is one of those strange forces that has a lot more rules than you would expect, but most of them are unknown. And it has many mysteries that will never be solved. I fear this is one of those such cases. Every now and again, a wraith can be seen staring at something the person cared about in life, or stopping an attack to stare at a person they deeply cared for. But in all of these examples, the wraith will go back to fighting shortly after. It's more like they are pausing to process the information in front of them, rather than out of a need or care for something. There's most likely just too much information flowing through them, and it is forcing them to pause and process. Given how much we care about some things, we might have so many memories tied to them. It needs to process all that are important, at least to what the person thought they were. Now I should get into their being and what they are capable of, for I have yet to mention that they are in fact incorporeal, and like most, are capable of moving through objects. They can in fact move through any object with no real restriction, but do so a little slower and less often than some other undead. And like them, they cannot stay inside of an object. They must keep moving, lest they be harmed by the forces of our world. Wraiths themselves, however, are incredibly difficult to damage, even more so than regular incorporeal undead. Essentially, every attack is going to be half as efficient unless you have a magical blade that is also made of silver, just to add even more annoying steps to make them borderline impossible to kill for a non-professional. There are a few niche types of magic that can also harm them fully, but, well, unless you're specifically aiming to fight a wraith, don't bother. They also have the ability to sap and drain at your very life force as well, as this is a common undead ability. This can slowly be healed, provided you take time to rest after the attack and allow your soul to rest. But in the moment of battle magic, you cannot heal someone, as you can't really refill a glass that has been shattered. Theirs is a particularly nasty life drain too. Not the worst, but definitely one to be quite wary of. And lastly, they have the ability to create another undead under their control. But this does not make another form of wraith, but a new thing entirely, known as a spectre, a type of undead I have yet to actually talk about in detail, so I shan't for today. Just know they are quite simple compared to the wraith, but a bit weaker and a bit sadder. They are one of the best examples of how the rules of the afterlife are so unfair to those who have become undead. They can actually create quite a few of these and control them all at once, with most being able to create about 7 and still retaining control over them. But I've seen some old and powerful ones create even more, and I've even heard tales of some of the ancient ones making as many as 20. But with magic like this, it's very much a case-by-case basis. They can also create them from those recently deceased around them. They do not have to do it as soon as they die, though it does have to be quite quick, and they do have to die violently, as in during a fight, meaning anyone a wraith or any spectres kills can be turned if it's fast enough. This means that if you are fighting a wraith with a force of spectres in a populated area they are attacking, you need to keep in mind they can immediately replace a fallen spectator. Because of this, I've actually seen a vengeful paladin use light to disintegrate a fallen civilian's corpse in order to prevent this. A bit overkill, but it very much did make the fight a lot easier. Spectres are powerful enough so that you can't just ignore them. You will need to focus on them during a fight. Fortunately, wraiths do have one small weakness in their aversion to sunlight. Sadly, it does not harm them in any way, just hinders them massively, and so they are often want to avoid it as best they can. Because of this, you are better off hunting them at night should you know of their presence. You can also use this to lure them away from a location, or just control them a little as well. Wraiths are weird in their commonality. They are common enough to where people will know about them, and every family will have at least one tale about them, but it's also quite reasonable that someone would never actually encounter one, at least not in the wild. And every adventurer has probably had to deal with them at some point or another, and depending on when in your journey you do so, they might actually be quite a hard challenge for you. See, many partly dismiss the wraith for a moment, due to, well, all facets that matter, combat-wise at least, they are just a more powerful shadow. The only things the shadows have over them is that their undead they make are just as powerful as them, they are them in fact, and there is no real limit to them. But the fact that the wraiths have complete control over them is worth mentioning. The difference in power between them two is actually quite noticeable. A wraith could easily destroy several shadows without actually worrying about it. The tale I have of a wraith isn't actually about them in combat or something they do, but rather the power that they actually wield. See, when they kill someone and turn them into spectres, they actually stop that person from entering the afterlife. Ever. Short of the world-changing spell like Wish, or an actual pardon from a deity, there is nothing you can do to help this person carry on. This is, well, it's a devastating information just to hear, but it also leads to some horrible scenarios. See, one town suffered from a particularly nasty wraith attack. The thing that made the situation worse was that the town could actually fight back, which resulted in many spectators being killed, which ended up with even more people being turned into them. In the end, more of its inhabitants were turned into spectators than not, and the wraith fled, but was still alive, though horribly damaged. The remaining people feared and fretted on what to do now that they thought that their lot was hopeless. Learning of the fate of their friends and families, they just sort of gave up. It broke who little remained. A small gang of young men turned to banditry, and started with their hometown, or what little was left of it, doing unspeakable things to their own friends and family, and after which turned nomadic and even more depraved. They even took up demon worship, and became as evil as one truly could. The logic behind it being, if so many good people could be turned away from the afterlife through no fault of their own, why bother trying? Why not just indulge in every dark desire you have? And so they became truly horrid. Enough so to even create another wraith. Their leader turned into one not too shortly after they started roaming, and slaughtered the camp anew, leaving no survivors. And as a twisted turn of fate, the new wraith found the old one, and they worked together to try and destroy another place. This one was filled with powerful adventurers, however, and they were utterly destroyed. Wraiths are spiteful undead. There is nothing to be redeemed or anything left of the original person to begin with. Truly, there is actually little nuance to the wraith compared to other undead, say, its power and sometimes dark origin. They are a type of undead you really should attack on sight with no remorse, and doing otherwise would invite falling, at least in my advice. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next time, fellow traveler, have a good day.